Hey everyone, as part of Sky's partnership with Internet Matters, we are starting a podcast series that discusses pertinent topics around keeping your children safe online. This episode discusses Anti-Bullying Week and offers important tips to support the family. Your host today is Jackie Woodham.
So hi everyone, my name's Jackie and I am lucky enough to be on this call today with Ghislaine, who is from the charity Internet Matters. So Parents at Sky Network has been partnered up on this call in a series of different podcasts. So this will be the very first one that we're doing. So the reason we're doing this today is because it's Anti-Bullying Week. And we're looking to just kind of put a focus on cyberbullying. So who better to talk us through that than an expert? Ghislaine, that's yourself. So Internet Matters, morning. Internet Matters is a not-for-profit industry-filled coalition that helps families stay safe online. It provides resources for parents, carers and professionals. Internet Matters' vision is to inspire leading organisations to create together a future where children and young people are prepared to benefit safely from the impact of connected technology. So Sky was one of the founding members when this organisation was launched in 2014, along with other major UK internet service providers, and the partnership still stands strong to this day. So we're committed to working together to keep children safe in the digital world. So my name's Jackie, as I said earlier. I'm a rep from the Parents at Sky Network, which is why I'm kind of helping lead this podcast today. And this will be available on our SharePoint after this session has been completed. But Ghislaine, do you want to kind of introduce yourself and give a summary of what your role is at the at your charity Internet Matters? Because it's a very important role, yeah.
Yes, so I'm head of digital at Internet Matters, and my role really entails working with industry experts within online safety to really try to create content that will help parents keep their children safe online. So a lot of my role really tries to really understand what are those parent concerns, what are parents concerned about as far as what their children are doing online, what are children actually doing online for us to give them the right advice as far as helping them to stay safe. So it's and with the changing nature of online and the way that children are engaging, this is something for parents that is, as they get older, particularly for children, it gets harder for them to understand. So really for us is to create content that is bite-sized and that is impactful, and that really helps them to make sure that their children's well-being is protected when they're online, but also that they're benefiting from the connected technology.
That's brilliant. And I think what you said there, bite-sized bits of support would be ideal, because as a parent you never stop, do you? It's always busy all the time. So we do have a couple of questions here from the network that I'm part of, but also a couple other networks across Sky. I'm going to ask you some questions, and that'd be great if you could just share your advice, any support you can point us to kind of help cover this, because I know cyberbullying, it's a big thing nowadays. Like, I remember I was growing up and wasn't really any of this around, because nobody used the internet, and I'd literally only just started getting flip phone cameras at this point. So a lot of it is quite worrying for me, having a little girl at the moment who's going to grow up in this kind of world. So, and I'm sure many parents feel exactly the same. So I think to start off, the first question which would be useful to ask is just, what is classed as cyberbullying?
So as you mentioned about the fact that this bullying has existed before the internet, so it's essentially bullying online. So through internet connected devices and platforms, so social media platforms, messaging services. So essentially it's where you are being targeted by somebody repeatedly, and you could classify as harassment or as cyber stalking or catfishing. There's different terms that our children use within their language, but it's a range of things that happen to you online where you're repeatedly targeted, and essentially it's something that has evolved with the growth of use of online. I think we can all say that internet is pretty much the central part of our lives. I think I can't exist with my phone without my phone. So I think for children it's equally all encompassing. So it's essentially where bullying has become something that is being done online, and actually whereas bullying at school, possibly you could escape it, you go home, shut your door and you feel a bit safer. With cyberbullying, it's slightly worse because it does follow you around, because it is on your phone and it's recorded. So there's an added element of not being escapable for children.
Yeah, which must be really, really tough for a lot of people, isn't it? Definitely doesn't sound like something that would.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
for children, I think we've seen, particularly when we first started to kind of create content around this issue, it's something that tends to happen off the back of building relationships for children who are, going, for example, from year 6 to year 7, getting those new phones, the nuances of connecting online, creating those relationships and managing the relationship. You see this happen quite a lot, and as far as connecting that with schools is where you've got those relationships where they're quite new, then you're starting to talk online, and then maybe because you don't know the nuances about connecting, it becomes more prevalent, particularly for within the friendship groups, as we found through our research.
Yeah. So what's the kind of impact that cyberbullying could actually have on someone?
I think the key thing is that it's at the end of an account, particularly for children to understand, is that there is a real person, right? So when you are sending something to somebody, whether you think it's a joke or whether you think it's banter, it may not be received as such, particularly for the other person who's being targeted. So for that child who is experiencing cyberbullying, there can be a number of different effects. It could affect their self-esteem, their mental health, particularly if they are repeatedly being targeted by a group of people or ganged up on by a group of people that they know from school. So it carries on from the school environment. So there's a range of things that it really can impact their mental health. It really can impact their self-awareness, self-identity, and in some cases they can start to self-harm. So it can be really detrimental to a child's well-being.
Yes, it's awful, isn't it? So think about, I'm a parent, and let's just say my child was being cyberbullied. How could I spot that or recognise it? Like, what would be the signs to kind of look out for?
I think the key thing is, every child is different. So that's the first thing I'll say. So
Yeah.
I think for you as a parent, your child, when they're happy, when they're excited about something. If suddenly there's a behavior change and you see that they're either no longer wanting to pick up their phone, or there's elements where they're seeing their phone going off repeatedly and they're just ignoring it, that may be a sign. In other cases, they may be over consuming into the internet, so being gaming or socializing, they're constantly looking out for those negative comments, because a lot of the time the children who are being bullied, they see that quite a lot and they look out for it, and it becomes something that's a self-perpetuating thing where they are, they see themselves as that, and then they start to see that, oh well, everybody doesn't like me, everything that I get is very negative. So I think it's really looking out for those changes in behavior, changes in internet usage, and if they are unwilling to go to school, particularly if it's something that is related to a friendship group that they have at school and it's now being manifested online, those are the kind of things that you should definitely be aware of. And as I said, every child's different, so as a parent, just to be on the lookout for those kind of changes in behavior.
Yeah, thank you. So what can parents do to help?
I think the key thing is right from the get-go, if you are giving your child a phone, or if they've already got a phone, it's part of their life. So really the thing to do is to just stay engaged with what they're doing online. Just be interested in who they're talking to, ask them questions, have some bite-sized conversation about it so you're aware, and you can create those moments where you have informed questions as opposed to kind of not understanding what they're doing. So give them the opportunity to talk to you about what they do, who they chat to, what platforms they use. So you can also go away and do a bit of homework and look at those platforms to understand how they work, or they can run you through that. The other thing that you could do, and if you are allowing your child, particularly if they're from 13 onwards, if they're on social media or other platforms which are within their minimum age, is to just sit together and look at ways that you can actually tackle these issues. So for example, on a number of different platforms, there's ways to block, to set privacy settings, to make sure that only those that you want to see your content or want to interact with are the ones that will be able to do so. So just to sit together, just to understand where those features are and what features are available would be really good. Now, if your child is unfortunately, the more time they spend online, the more likely that they may encounter some of this issue specifically. So I think it's just to kind of sit down and think about the different scenarios. Use different ways, ask them questions around here. What would you do if this happened? And to try to gauge how they would go about, trying to deal with those issues. And finally, I think the key thing for them, and as we've seen from a number of different research, where it said that a lot of children tend not to tell their parents, or tell if something really bad's happened, they tend to try to deal with it themselves. So one of the major things that we try to tell parents is make sure you tell your child to talk to somebody. It's so important, because a lot of the time cyberbullying can be, an element where they think, oh, it's if I tell somebody, they won't believe me, or they'll think it's my fault, or they'll blame it on me, or I've started it somehow. So the key thing to tell your child is, please, if you can't talk to me, please talk to somebody, a trusted adult, or there are, opportunities to speak to a Childline, which is one of the organizations that we signpost on our website. So that's one of the key things. If they are seeing, even if it's not them directly being impacted by cyberbullying, it might be a friend, it's really important to tell somebody and reach out to a trusted adult to get something done to deal with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of leads on to another thing that I think would be quite important. So actually, when should we be starting to have these conversations with our children, as in when to reach out for support and ask, like tell someone like you've just said, but actually letting them know what cyberbullying is, because a lot of young people are getting younger and younger, having access to the internet and social media and things nowadays. So actually, when should we be having these conversations, and what would that kind of look like?
I think as far as the risk that they can face, particularly with cyberbullying, I'd say as soon as your child is able to interact with others online. So if they're using platforms, gaming platforms, particularly, over the course of the past few years, where the internet has been, as you said, mentioned, where children are getting online younger and younger, I think it's really important to start those conversations as early as you can within reason, and have age-appropriate conversations about it. So if your child is, gaming and connecting with even friends that they know, it's really important to talk to them about it. And it could just be a simple conversation about, particularly if your child, let's say 6 years old, and they're gaming on a platform that's well known to them and their friends. It's just to say, if you experience something, just come talk to me, or if you see somebody that is targeting you or sending you nasty messages, then you should come and talk to me. So giving them the opportunity to set out what scenarios that could happen and what they could do in that instance to deal with it. So I think as early as you can, as soon as they start to interact with others online, being able to share things, send messages, that's the point at which I'd say you'd want to start to talk about it. You could even go younger, particularly if your child is 4 years old and has their own tablet and are able to interact. I'm not quite sure if that should be the right thing to do, but again, you're a parent, you can make those decisions. But yeah, as soon as they can go independently to interact with others, that's the point at which you should having this conversation and reinforcing them. So it's not just the one conversation, but having small conversations, and often just reminding them, like, how are you doing online? Has anybody said anything to you, or have you seen anything said to other people, and or did you challenge that, or did you want me to have a look at your account, or to set some privacy settings? So just kind of be constantly having that touch point with your child to continue that conversation. Ultimately, it's kind of that broken record. You want to be that broken record on this issue, where they know, I know exactly what I have to do because my mom or my dad or my carer has told me repeatedly as to what to do.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I think like the broken record is a great example, because actually the more we ask and we get that conversation going with our child, the more likely they are to tell us, or us to spot something, aren't they? So what kind of support is available for parents and their children?
So primarily, we as an organisation, Internet Matters, so at internetmatters.org, we've got a range of support for parents, particularly, as I said, about, how to start those conversations, what kind of things to be aware of, what things to spot, where to go for additional information. So you can definitely go to our website, internetmatters.org, to get advice. I've got a cyberbullying advice hub that has all the information there to kind of get you started in thinking about the issue and thinking about how to broach that issue with your child. And as we know, every child at different ages, they do different things. So if you've got a 6-year-old, we've got advice guides for 6 to 10-year-olds and so forth. So age-specific advice that you can really tailor your conversations with your child. And then for children, we have created a new online learning platform, which is called Digital Matters. Now, it's specifically created for teachers, but it's also available for parents to utilize. And what we think is that if you can start that conversation and use it as a tool, essentially to kind of help them to understand, using scenario-based quiz, essentially, to really walk them through, okay, well, if this happened, what would you do? If this happened, what would you do? To learn about the consequences of actually what a cyberbullying situation would look like, so they can already see what that could be and how you could resolve it and what things you should and shouldn't do. So you could utilize that platform to try to have those conversations and try to test your child's understanding around this issue. Outside of that, if your child has experienced or has seen their friends experience on cyberbullying, I'd say the key thing is to be aware of your school's policy, because every school will have a cyberbullying policy. And what we tend to see is typically with cyberbullying, the child will be known to them, or the person who is bullying them will be known to them. So it's really important to just connect with your school, just be aware of what that is, so you can get support from your school if the child who's bullying your child is in the same school, so you can get that sorted. Again, all the different platforms that your child goes to, so whether it's a social media platform, a gaming platform, they will have advice portals as well, and ways to kind of manage that on their platform. So just make yourself aware of what that is, and make sure that you're aware of how to kind of utilize that information. And outside of that, if you feel your child has been impacted quite a lot by what they've seen by cyberbullying, we always say, speak to your GP, because some children, it does impact them, as I said, about their well-being, and it could lead them to self-harm or suicidal thoughts in some cases, some really distraught cases. So, the first point of call in that instance is just to reach out to your GP to start that conversation up, and just to make sure that you get the right support for your child.
Yeah, thank you. It's a lot there, and it's a scary thought, isn't it? The impact it can have on someone. So how are marginalised groups, so for example, LGBTQ plus youth, impacted by cyberbullying in comparison with other groups?
So there's a lot of research around LGBTQ plus community in terms of children. And as you can imagine, if you are an LGBTQ plus a young person and there's no one else around you that identifies as that, a lot of children may go online and use different platforms where they are, looking for advice, looking for guidance. And in some cases, because they're identifying themselves online, they could be targeted. Because of their sexual preference. And so what we tend to see is they tend to experience cyberbullying on a higher level, in terms of just because of that they identify as their sexual identification. So what we'd say is that if your child is LGBTQ plus, I think there's an element that you should talk to them more about the things that they do online, where they go for support, how they interact online, because there is that added level of targeting, unfortunately, and it stems from a lot of these platforms where children's things like the non-anonymity of things. So you do tend to get a lot of online hate around groups, which unfortunately the platforms that social media platforms are doing more to support them, but there is, again, user-generated content. There'll be quite a lot of that, unfortunately, that isn't captured, and that is quite nuanced. So I think, unfortunately, for those groups, there is that added level of cyberbullying. And also, if you are different, just generally different, I think typically, unfortunately, that puts you in that group where you are going to be more targeted. So we'd say, I think for that group particularly, if you're a parent of a child who identifies as that, we would say, really just try to start that as conversations early on. If you don't know, sometimes they don't come out, so they'll deal with it by themselves, and that's another element. So there are organizations that are available to them where they can get that support if they don't feel that they can get that home. Again, Childline would be one thing that I would always flag to kind of go to that, to have those counselors who can support them. But again, it's much more prevalent among that community, and unfortunately so.
Yeah. So with them being higher risk of being targeted, is there any specialist advice for these groups? Or
Yes, so I think there's a number of organisations that that you can reach out to, as I said, but I probably would flag Childline as a first port of call, because they have recommended child counsellors part of that, but also what we've done on our website for parents who obviously have children within this group. We have advice as to what you can do, what kind of conversation you need to have, what kind of things you need to watch out for in terms of the risks of what they may be doing online, and how that can that can impact them, and where to go for support. So I think the key thing I would say is that if your child has experienced or is experiencing cyberbullying, there's all the things I've said before still apply. So having those conversations still apply. But I guess for a child who is part of this group, just make them aware of what are those coping mechanisms. What if they do see something, where can you go? Because if they are being targeted because of their sexual preference, that can you can report that as an online hate crime. So there is an added level of reporting that you can do. Seek help from the platform themselves. So I think there's all the things that I've said before, as far as getting that support, but also just being aware that this is a protected group, so they do have an added recourse in terms of getting that reported.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of switching it around now. So what if you find out your child is the one doing the cyberbullying? What can you do with that?
I think for most parents, it probably could come as a shock, because you would never accept that your child would be doing something like that. But I think what tends to happen is, because you've got the element of the, you can't see the person's reaction. Sometimes even people who have never bullied in real life tend to fall into it, because peer pressure, because they're part of a group, or they feel that they want to be to be accepted. They'll do something that they don't particularly do. So sometimes it can be the intent of where it comes from is really important. So you as a parent, if you do get a call from the school saying, oh, this has happened, your child has been identified as the perpetrator of something online, and I think the first thing is just to sit down with your child and talk to them, to understand how it happened, what were their intent, what led them to do this kind of behavior, because sometimes it may be that they're retaliating because they've been bullied themselves. So it's not always black and white. It's a very gray area when it comes to bullies online. So I think for a parent, just sit down with your child, explain to them that this kind of behavior, it's not acceptable, and the impact that it can have, so they really do understand the impact of their words that has happened on that particular person, and try to really talk them through the kind of things, the empathy side of things. So they really understand that what they write online really has an impact to a real person. And I guess the other thing is to think about how are they using the internet, what platforms are they using, so really trying to work together to monitor their communications after that point. Put together a plan as to try to think about how they should be using their social media accounts, how they should be gaming, what kind of language they should and shouldn't be using, and again, if they are seen to be doing this kind of behavior, maybe reaching out to the person they have bullied and saying sorry, and explaining themselves a little bit more, so you do have this identification of, yeah, this is the wrong behavior and this is the right behavior, and this is what I'm going to go forward to not do that again. So it's a lot for the parent. It's just ideally start with a conversation and then put some action steps together to make sure that it's not something that's repeated, and if it is something that they're doing because they're retaliating, then trying to get to the bottom of the issue to make sure that they also receive the help that they need.
Perfect. Lots of information there.
Yeah.
So that's all the questions I've got. Is there anything else that you want to add that we've maybe not covered so far?
I think the key thing is what I would say to all parents is that every child is different, and I think particularly for this issue, in and above your child experiencing it for themselves as being the victim, a lot of the times, children will be bystanders. So there'll be the group that sits around somebody who is being a victim. So if to make sure that your child, even if your child is not directly affected by cyberbullying, if they do see it happen, to speak up about it. To be that upstander, as we call it, to really try to support the person who is being targeted, to speak out and not to let something go on and on. We can empower those that surround that child, those that see those messages, those that maybe pressured into kind of following along to carry on that behavior. So I think if you are seeing something as a parent, just encourage your child to say something, to stand up and just share that what's going on, so that you can get to a place where that child receives the right support to deal with that situation.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ghislaine, for going through all of that with us. I'm sure lots of parents will find that really useful as part of our anti-bullying week. So that kind of brings us to the end of our wee first podcast, which will be shared online through our Share Drive points. So you can find this information and support on pages such as the Cyberbullying Facts and Advice and supporting LGBTQ+ children and young people. But the website internetmatters.org has lots of great information on there as well. So if you need any further support and having these conversations or things to look out for, and please make use of these sites, because it's something that can really help you. But thank you very much for your time today. It's really appreciated.
All right, thank you.